Hello, YouTube, and it's time once again. It's this beautiful, beautiful Sunday evening, and it's time for another reaction and review. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be checking out a movie from 2010, and that movie is Kick-Ass. Now, the only things I need to specifically point out about Kick-Ass before we begin, aside from the fact that I know that this has Nicolas Cage and Aaron Johnson, is that this is also based on the Mark Millar comic book graphic novel of the same name. And even though I haven't read Mark Millar's novel, I heard a lot of good things about this movie when it actually was released back in the day. Except the only thing is that I've just never quite got really round to watching it. So I think it's time we put this another one of life's great mysteries to finally be solved. Don't you think? So, I mean, I don't know quite exactly if I'm even gonna what exactly I'm expecting to get into this, but I think all will be revealed, I think, very momentarily. So, I mean, good or bad, I want to find out, because I was in the mood of something a little bit more action-oriented. I mean, last week was pretty violent enough when we did Mississippi Burning, but let's see how brutal we can get. Because I heard Mark Millar, I do know his reputation as a pretty violent comic book writer or artist or whatever. But let's see how that's reflected. So, it's time to kick back, relax, and check out Kick-Ass. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Kick-Ass. Let me just turn this off there, and there we go. So, Kick-Ass, ladies and gentlemen. First thing, I want to get this off the bat right now, just before we go any further. Nicolas Cage. First real movie I can actually say I've actually seen that's actually got Nicolas Cage in, and as far as I can work out, he is one of those people who is trying so hard, but is also not really trying at all. I mean, I suppose really this was kind of like the epitome for Nicolas Cage to play a Batman knockoff in Big Daddy, but the problem is that Nicolas Cage, it's, well, okay, I think it sort of fits in with this sort of movie, fits in with him. Because Kick-Ass, I've got a few problems I want to get off the bat right away. And maybe it's because it's got more to do with its source material. Maybe not just because Matthew Vaughn, I mean, I've heard of the name Matthew Vaughn before, and I've heard of it maybe somewhere else, but I can't quite tell you what other movies he's directed. I know he's done other work. It's just I kind of recognize the name, but I don't recognize where else he came from. Now, here's sort of one of the issues I have with this movie, and we'll do this step by step. Aaron Johnson as Kick-Ass, as Dave Lewinsky, it's not a bad decision to make, but the problem is that I think it's more to do with the story. Now, the movie basically begins with Dave lamenting why doesn't some people just become superheroes like they read in the comics. So you might think to yourself, well, maybe it's tackling an issue regarding the entirety of, maybe it's going to be a deconstruction of the superhero genre. Maybe that's what they're going for. I.e., they take things down and they talk about them in detail, should superheroes use violence, aka what's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way, or Superman versus the Elite, which is just the animated film based on the same comic. However, by about the 22-minute mark, it doesn't quite go that way. Dave ends up getting attacked by carjackers. He gets run over, and we're almost immediately introduced to. Well, I think one of the biggest things, and I can't tell what it is. It's that the problem is that it's kind of a little bit too. It's the violence in the movie is, it's very weird to describe the violence. It's that it's comical, but it doesn't disguise the fact that it's quite violent. It's more comical. It's when people get punched or when somebody gets shot, it doesn't necessarily feel as if like there's like weight behind it. It feels as like, I think it's because they're like either blaring music or there isn't like much in the way of really seriousness happening because I somehow don't quite take this as seriously as I should, and maybe that's got to do with Nicolas Cage, or maybe it's the fact that realistically the movie should have really centered around Hit Girl, if you ask me. I mean, Hit Girl's the one with the more interesting is the one who has the more interesting interactions. This 10-year-old kid who's Mindy, who's been brought up by her dad, who just came out of prison for being falsely set up as a drug dealer. Then she goes under rigorous training. The first scene we have her with Cage, she gets shot in the chest to practice, you know, how to sustain being under fire. This is, I think, there's only one other time this actually does happen in the movie, but it still seems very, very strange that the way they planned it all out, just to have Mindy getting shot all of about maybe 5 times in this movie. And yet, so ironically, when she gets like punched in the face by Frank, it literally she looks stunned and winded from just taking one punch to the face, and Mindy gets shot is basically is getting shot at a lot in this movie. So I'm not entirely sure what's up with that. I mean, because the thing about her like nearly getting killed in the end by Frank, only for Kick-Ass to shoot a bazooka. You see, I think that's the biggest issue, is that they are so over the top with the violence in this movie. It's not like you've watched the same movie that started off with why don't people become superheroes, and then there's then there's this part where Kick-Ass gets basically beaten and then stabbed, and basically he's been left for dead in the middle of the road, and everything slows down, and it looks like they might just do it that he might not pull through, which for me, I think that's quite interesting. Maybe he'll go through like maybe rehab, or maybe he'll go through what exactly does he want to do next, or maybe he just wants to put put away his wetsuit again and his batons and focus on other areas of being a superhero. And then maybe years later he'll be caught. And listen, I've never read Kick-Ass, and maybe because obviously Mark Miller had a hand in producing this movie, maybe that's the problem. It's that it almost turns into just a generic little dumb action film, and that's kind of what Kick-Ass is that I think there's like a difference in film between a superhero movie, which is, you know, you got your Superman, you got Spider-Man, you got Green Lantern, you got you got all that good stuff, and then there's the difference between an action film, let's say Die Hard or Die Another Day or something like that, where it's a bunch of really sour-faced looking burly guys shooting each other over past things, over past disputes or whatever it might be. Really, it's kind of like trying to blend the two, but unfortunately, since nobody has, well, apart from Kick-Ass, who has slightly toughened nerves as a result of, you know, being basically beaten half to death, so I don't really know if you could technically call that a power, having basically plates put all over your body. I mean, he calls it's like Wolverine, but those were his words, not mine. Nevertheless, it looks a little bit hard to believe, and an audience is, the movie hasn't got a problem with contriving the audience into stretching their suspense of disbelief. I mean, why can't we have an over-the-top film about where basically a little 10-year-old girl is slicing and dicing, shooting holes through dozens of people, her dad being Nicolas Cage, and dressing up like Batman, is that it's silly. It's both silly, but it's not really done in sort of like a little tongue-in-cheek way. They build this up that it's a long, very convoluted sort of little quest for revenge. And that really, getting back to what I was saying about this movie should have really been about Hit-Go, is that for the most, really, the rest of the movie, Kick-Ass is just kind of there for the ride. Even when Red Mist arrived, it's just like, well, Red Mist was only there just so Kick-Ass could lead him to Big Daddy and Hit-Go to be kidnapped by Frank's goons. That's really the whole point of Red Mist, and he's sort of basically out of the movie for the last like 40 minutes. I mean, and Kick-Ass, the only thing Hit-Go was the one who had to go through the building and shoot as though she were Frank Castle. And then it cuts this really weird sequence where, and it's not that the sequence is weird, it's that actually, you know what? Well, I'll explain this very methodically about what the problem I have with this is. That Kick-Ass is flying on a jetpack. He's got minis on his shoulders, and he basically does the thing where he just shoots and all the glass breaks and puts holes in just about 4 to 5 people on this floor. And there's some kind of opera music playing in the background, and by the time it's all over, it's kind of like how you would expect. It's just, let's put something beautiful in contrast with ultra violence, you might say. And then, strangely enough, when it all ends, you can hear this very audible round of applause, as though this was the 1994 Free Tenors live performance in Los Angeles. I'm pretty sure that's where they got that from, because I'm pretty sure that round of applause was not supposed to have been in that part. I'm pretty sure, because they tried to dub it out, but you could hear it as plain as day that it's still there, which might have just been a problem with editing. But the way they put music over every shot, that it's just kind of there to be flashy or a little bit, brutal. It's that we can't just sit back and just watch it. It takes us a little bit out of the action, because it doesn't look, and I think it's a bit of a dated sort of thing to do, to just put music or whatever it might be when there's something going on in a scene. If it's just to like establish like maybe exploration, or just to give us a bit of, I think it's because they keep doing this in the movie, is that they will put any music just when there's like an action sequence, or when they're just like transitioning away, or they're talking about something miscellaneous. Is that it's not the most investing of stories, because it's mostly just people shooting each other for nearly 2 hours, and that's for the lack of a word, I don't think that's particularly very interesting, and not very superhero-y. Not like, if I wanted to watch a superhero movie, I would watch it where, I don't know, there would be people doing extraordinary things, and you could do really, really creative stunts where, I don't know, you could have Superman like leaping from the ground, literally putting his fist through the moon. That's sort of creative. In Kick-Ass, it's just, let's put in as many over-the-top guns. Let's have these scenarios where basically just people getting beaten up. Let's just do the only really creative kill, aside from maybe Frank. The thing about Frank getting shot with a bazooka isn't really that interesting either, because you could have just replaced the line with "you're fired" and just shot him through the window there. Apart from like maybe one goon who got like roasted to death in some sort of like lumberjack microwave, there's no for a movie that talks about like superheroes and saying that why does anybody want to be something this fantastic, they don't do a lot of fantastic things in this movie, and that's a problem, because it's not very I mean, that's really the story. It's just Big Daddy and Hit-Go out for revenge against this this crime lord, and Frank is not interesting as he's not interesting because he just kind of like, he sits back, sometimes he talks to his son, and that's it. There's just, he's not interesting to look at. He doesn't have any really interesting qualities. I'm watching it and I'm kind of like, okay, well, okay, I guess. That's the problem, is that the longer you watch, you just realize people get shot or whatever. It's not very interesting a premise. And that's my honest take from this movie. Now, the cinematography is fine, I suppose. The action sequence, again, are just kind of okay, I guess. Because, again, for the most part, if it's just people just shooting each other, you can't even get any, like, martial arts or anything there. You couldn't, like, maybe come up with a hero that had some interesting... Red Mist doesn't even really do any action in this movie, and I understand... I'm going to go on a limb that maybe in Kick-Ass 2 he does a little bit more, but it's... I've got no other words to say, guys. I was not really that interested. I'm not even sure if I would even be interested in the second movie, to be honest, because it was such an underwhelming little number, and who cares if... Well, it's pretty obvious that Hit-Go was always going to, get away in the end by murdering Frank, but the way they led up to that, had Hit-Go basically killed everyone in her path, and then she just goes down after like one punch to the face, and it's down to Kick-Ass to just save the day. I don't know why, but it felt like Hit-Go did a lot of the work, and they had to make this movie still revolve around Kick-Ass, and okay, so that's my honest to God take from this movie, is that just make this movie about Hit-Go, and you're gonna be you could be onto something by having a child basically revolve around being involved in mass murder and slicing people open and being an expert in butterfly knife skills or whatever it is, and knowing an AK-45 when she sees one. But aside from that, again, Aaron Johnson just kind of like is the geeky superhero like lead, and he gets tougher in the movie, but that's only because he's got more weapons to use when he's not being kidnapped. Even his plotline with this chick who I can't even remember just goes nowhere. They have sex behind a dumpster, and there's nothing more heard from her at the end of it. By the end of the movie, she's just making out Kick-Ass, and that's it. The movie is has almost wants nothing to do with these characters once everything's said and done. It's just it feels like we could have just you could have like skipped to the end of the movie in like the last 5 minutes, and I'm not entirely sure you would have missed much aside from maybe the opening 10 minutes. So, and that's like a very big issue where you could just watch the beginning and then skip towards the very end, and that's it. I mean, hell, I've got an issue. I've got my full graphic novel of Watchmen, all 12 issues, and I can tell you categorically, you cannot just get to read the first and then the last issue and go away feeling as if, well, at least we know how it ended. You can't... Movies should not work like that. Speaking of, actually, I do have a copy of 2009's Watchmen by Zack Snyder, I think, because I'm pretty sure, didn't Watchmen came out a year... I mean, I haven't even seen Watchmen since I got it, and it was meant to come out a year before Kick-Ass, so... I mean, I would say I wanted to watch Watchmen, but the problem is that I've read the novel, the graphic novel, nearly 50 times since I got it, and that was nearly 6 years ago now. But maybe that's why I should want to watch the movie, actually, because, for the lack of a better term, then At least it's based on something I'm familiar with, and maybe something that will get me to just go back and read it again, or maybe buy the black and white edition. It's literally just the same comic, but just they did it in black and white. I wouldn't mind that much because nothing else about the thing changes. So anyway, aside from that, my honest opinion about Kick-Ass is I'm glad I saw it once, but I don't think I'll be watching this again. And that's really interesting, the reviews they gave on the back of this. 5-star from The Guardian. A slam dunk James King on fuck James King. Action-packed and hilarious, News of the World. Oh yeah, how well did that go for you, that review there, News of the World? Because they got shut down a year later. In fact, it's coming up to 10 years since the News of the World got shut down. Oops. Well, aside from that, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for my review of Kick-Ass. If you do want me to check out, I might, if I'm a little bit curious, just to see why there needs to be a sequel, because everything is pretty much, aside from Red Mist, I don't know what Red Mist could do. I don't know what he could be capable of. Now that he... Hang on a minute. He has his dad's building. Okay, that's a big problem. They know fine well that Frank was a crime lord, and that... Well, wouldn't police have swarmed the... You would have thought police would have swarmed that building, curious as to why there were so many dead people, and the huge explosion where a human being was just shot at with a bazooka. You would have thought that would have made the police a little bit curious, or the copious amounts of gunfire, or why Kick-Ass is levitating nearly, like 25 stories above the ground. You would have thought the police at least would have noticed that. So, stick a fork in me, I'm done. That just... Yeah. Brilliant, thrilling, deliriously entertaining. I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for my review of Kick-Ass. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I will see all of you guys again in the next movie review. Take care. Bye-bye for now. Oh, and they also mentioned like MySpace a couple of times. Anything that didn't age well at all. Bit like this movie in many ways. Bye-bye.